Dugout Nation, welcome to the Dugout CEO podcast. Today, I am joined by Tom Roy, the founder of UPI and current leader of Shepherd Coach Network. He is a former chaplain of the Chicago White Sox, NCCAA Baseball World Series chaplain for 30 years, signed with the San Francisco Giants when he was 17 years old, and his background includes working for 3 years as a head coach in the high school level and 15 years coaching collegiate college baseball. Tom, welcome to the Dugout CEO podcast.
My man, Casey, good to be here with you, buddy.
Good to have you here, and so excited that you're on the show today, and I know our listeners are as well. So, Tom, let's start with some fun stuff. Baseball. You got an amazing background as a player and a coach and all kinds of cool things. So maybe just tell our listeners some of your baseball background.
Well, in Little League, I started out as a catcher because I was the only guy that would catch with one shin guard and a mask. That's all we had. So obviously it meant I was going to be a pitcher someday when you have that kind of mentality, right? And so, I ended up pitching in high school and actually signed with the San Francisco Giants when I was 17. I had some injuries and the career didn't go like I hoped, like unfortunately a lot of guys, but I had a real love of baseball, and in reality, God ended up using that. Even though when I was released, I was very bitter. He came around and used that for good. So that's kind of my baseball background.
So talk to me about that. You're 17, signed this contract, doesn't turn out the way you want it. What happened after that, baseball-wise?
Well, coming home was interesting, right? I mean, anytime after a defeat like that, it's different than losing a 1-0 ball game. I mean, when I signed that contract, it meant I played high school basketball also, and I shot a lot, so I scored a lot. And when I signed it, I knew I'd given up all rights to do anything in college athletically. But I'm 17 and I'm like, I'm going to be fine. Well, now I find myself at home and I needed to think of a career. I was working in an aluminum foundry, and I decided to go to a place called Career Academy, which was a broadcasting school to learn how to broadcast. Back then, you had to pass 3 tests. Now you just walk in, and if you're a personality, you're on the radio. But back then, you had an engineering part, an FCC part, and an English part. So I went to school, ended up getting a job in West Virginia, and I thought that was going to be my career path. I had become a believer in Jesus right before that. And when I got to the radio station, I got the worst jobs because I was the youngest. So I'm Sunday mornings, right? And that's pastor after pastor after pastor because it's the cheapest time. And one guy really hit it off with, well, he really challenged me to grow in my faith. And I'm glad I did. Like anything, business or whatever, it's an investment that you make in it. That's why I went to school to be an announcer. And now I'm going to school, if you will, not officially. And about a year into that, he challenged me to get a college degree. And I said, well, I don't have any money and I don't really like college. But he said, well, why don't you go up to our school? And I'd never heard of Grace College, nice hat, by the way, in Winona Lake, Indiana. Never heard of it. I'd heard of Marquette and Michigan State and, some of those, UCLA. But he said, well, it's a Bible college. Well, it turns out it's an NAIA school. So sure enough, when I got here, I tried out. Everything went well. But then when they found out that I'd played and signed a pro contract, it was over. But in God's economy, the basketball coach, who has been actually with the Miami Heat now for probably 20 years in the front office and was with the Lakers as an assistant coach, Chet Kammerer, he was gracious enough to say, how about if you come here as my manager? By the way, I would suit out for every practice and play the other team's gunner. So it was not really a manager, but it was. That was the title. And then I was a pitching coach in baseball. It was awesome. And I learned a lot from Chet and the coaching staff about what it looks like to be a godly man. And I'm not saying that I am, but they taught me a lot, good lessons at that point. And that evolved, if you will, into starting a company first called Diamond Enterprises. And we did baseball clinics in about 6 Midwestern states. And then it evolved from that into a thing called Unlimited Potential, which now 42 years later is still running, where we're taking former professional athletes and reaching back into that culture with the gospel. So that's kind of a quick overview.
That's awesome. UPI, that's how we got connected. And, I was somebody that just cared about baseball. But whenever a ministry has Major League Baseball players, I'm listening to whatever they say because I wanted to be that Major League Baseball player. And that ministry impacted my life and many of the people that I know. And want to talk a little bit more about that too. Now, was it before you started UPI or after you ended up becoming the head coach at Grace College?
That's a good, yeah, I forgot that part, didn't I? It was before, actually, I was the first head coach at a school that merged called Tippecanoe Valley. I was a high school head coach. And then Huntington University came and hired me as their pitching coach and associate director of admissions. And from that, Grace College, their president at the time, came to visit me and said, "What are you doing at Huntington?" Which was, by the way, an arch rival. And so he hired me as the head coach. And Grace College had so much to do, not only with my spiritual growth, but I remember how gracious they were when I started UPI. I went from a 12-month contract to a 9-month contract to a 6-month contract to a 3-month so that I could keep my insurance. We had no money. It was brand new work. And we walked out in faith to eventually go in full time. So, yeah, that's a very important part of this story that there were people that came alongside. I just didn't jump out of the boat and walk on water. There was, a little crawl before I walked.
Sure. So you're what, a 20-something-year-old head college coach, right?
Just hit 30. Well, when I was a pitching coach, yes, I was 21 when I started it, but I was a head coach at 29 or 30, yeah.
So you're a 21-year-old assistant pitching coach, 29-year-old head coach, trying to lead men. And, everybody that listens to this, they're a leader in some capacity, whether they're leading their family or they're leading a company or they're a coach. How did you get players to follow you? How did you get players to buy in? Because I've seen you in action as a coach and players adore you. They love you. I mean, the results you put on the field and off the field, like, how'd you do it?
Well, that's a great question. I think that especially initially, it was whoever I followed. I was in a very successful high school basketball program as a player, and that coach to me was like God. I was not a follower of Christ, but I saw how he ran practices, how he treated people and all of that. But when I got to Grace and I saw men like Chet Kammer, and there were others, Ivan Schuler, I could go down the list of different people, Phil Dick and all kinds of people. I realized that I was being a little too authoritarian, and I was kind of like a drill sergeant at times. And that's not bad, but I didn't have that compassion side. And so my philosophy, I now have a group called shepherdcoachnetwork.com. I always do that at it. I had to come up with my philosophy, and it was that people are more important than program. Program is more important than winning. Winning is important. So I didn't say, hey, who cares about the scoreboard? Not at all. And I think anybody that played for me knew that at times I went over the top on that one because, we unfortunately gain our identity on that scoreboard. But I always had to come back to that. Wait a minute. People are more important than program. Program is more important than winning. And when I talk program, that's a culture. And I wanted the culture to be that of Jesus, who was caring, but also had standards. And, the Bible says, whatever you do, do it heartily. So it wasn't like, let's just roll some baseballs out there and see if we can hit them and throw them. There was, a great, I thought for me, other than the last year, great attention to detail. And I think that the men saw that I loved them and that I cared about them. And I think, it's not one or the other. It's a combination.
How did they see that? What does that look like in action? The guys know that you love them and you care about them. What does that look like?
I push them to the max, and I ask for forgiveness when I walk over the line. I had to unfortunately do that a couple times. When I ran over an umpire in Hawaii, that I had my uniform was lost on the flight over, so I had street shoes on, and I did not like calls for 2 straight games of a doubleheader, and I ran out of the dugout, probably all frustrated for a number of reasons. And I had street shoes, and so I slid right into this little guy and knocked him over, and that was that. So I thought, well, now that I'm over him, I might as well yell at him, one of those things. So I was on him like a rat on a Cheeto, just screaming at him. And I realized that night, man, guys loved it that I was going out there protecting them, if you will, and standing up for them. But I also knew that in my faith, this didn't work. So, Casey, of all things, I first of all asked for forgiveness from my players. Some of them didn't like that, quite honestly. But I said, guys, I know that, we're here to win and we're here to play hard. But then I sensed I needed to talk to the other team. That was hard, and it was about obedience. So I asked the coach if I could go into his locker room and talk to the team, and I asked them for forgiveness. And I think that the guys, all of them saw that as something that was good. Some of them didn't agree with it because they're competitors and they were young men. But I think those are the kind of things when we show people that we're real. Ego plays a big part in leadership. You have to have that confidence, and hopefully it's godly confidence without being egotistical. And so trying to understand when I cross those lines. And again, with my philosophy, when in doubt, people are more important. I've always tried to go back to that. But again, that doesn't take away from setting standards and making them work hard, because I think they respect that too. You want to take them where they don't want to go sometimes, right? And you need to push them. But you also want them to know you care. And I think, when I retired from UPI, I think within an hour, the local college asked me to be the head coach again. And I said, no, I'm too old, but I'll come on as an assistant. And they said, no, maybe co-head coach. And I'll just share this with you. I've done 7 weddings of those guys since then, because I think I told them, first of all, anything with 2 heads is a monster. So the other guy's going to do the talking. And I took on that role of people are more important and the program is important. So it was a very fun position to be in. You don't want to be their best friend so that they like you, but you want them to know you care about them.
So pushing them to the max and asking for forgiveness. What does that look like? Whether you're, a CEO or a coach, pushing your team, pushing your players, pushing your employees to the max, getting them to believe in more. What does that actually look like?
Well, it goes back to, I think, and you understand this, you're hiring, how do you hire a person? And I look for passion. What makes you get up during the day? And then once I know your passion, if I have a few more years on you, I have an idea of the direction I need to get you to be able to obtain that passion, to be able to do what you're passionate about and not just what other people want you to do. Now, those guys that are out there to do just what they want, for the wrong reasons, it's harder. But I think that's the title leader coach. It's not just filling out a lineup card. It's talking to guys and talking about where they could be if they're ready to make a commitment. And if they're not, then I need to know, and if this is recreational. I remember one game we played and I had a guy come up to me, a parent after, and he was all upset. I said, what's wrong? We won. He goes, yeah, but you didn't play everybody. I said, as soon as you take that scoreboard down, I'll play everybody. If this is, softball league and we're just having fun. But the reality is there is a job description that says this is why you're here. And I think as a leader and a coach, we have to realize that we might not always be liked, even though that's one of my weaknesses. I want to be liked. But we're there to move these, in my case, men in a direction, not only individually, but as a team. And so it comes with practice. But there's that idea of having a philosophy, first of all, that you always fall back on, so that when you do walk off the side of it, you're able to come back, if not in asking for forgiveness, at least saying, you know what, personally, I need to get back on track. The reason I'm here is not to just wear the uniform and yell at umpires. It's to lead these men, and in my case, to be Christ-like men once they're done with the game.
Well, let's talk about pushing to the max. As coaches or business leaders, we're pushing others to the max. Do you find that whether it's a lot of business owners or head coaches, they have somebody that's pushing them to the max?
Well, one of my, and I didn't come up with this, but that I tell people is, and I just had a coach write me about this yesterday. Everybody needs a Paul, a Timothy, and a Barnabas. Paul is somebody that you call to say, keep me accountable. I need to keep learning. I keep moving. Um, a Timothy is somebody younger than you and as as a leader, you have those people, but sometimes the people under you are even older than you and you have to take that role. And then a Barnabas is an encourager. And so you cannot be an island. Everybody needs to be a peninsula, even as a leader. And I think it's so important to have that Paul in your life that is going to push you and keep you accountable for what you're supposed to be doing, not just a job description. I've had job descriptions and they look great the day you sign them, then you put them in the drawer, right? You need to have flesh and blood next to you or somebody you can call to say, are you on course? And let me teach you. I'm here because I as a leader, give them permission. And you're great at that, as a consultant, to be able to talk to somebody to say, what am I doing right? What am I doing wrong? I'm going to leave my ego here right now. I have to take it on at some level when I'm leading because it takes confidence. But again, that's a whole discussion. But I have somebody else in my life, just like I'm leading them. I need somebody to lead me.
Sure. I love that. Now, is that a little bit about what you're doing with Shepherd Coach? Talk to us about that.
Yeah, Shepherd Coach is reaching into good coaches, making them better coaches, because in my situation here, my belief, I want to share things about who Christ is and how that can make my philosophy work and to challenge them with that. And so I have an 8-week course that I give them. Well, they pay for it. I don't give it to them. I want to be careful how I say that. But and then they have me for a year after that, so that I can be a Paul. And I've found that it's been crazy, Casey. The course is fun because it's one-on-one. It's not like a group of 30 people and principals. It's how are you doing? Where are you at? What are your gifts and talents? Now let's talk about that. I have a curriculum, but that rest of the year, hey, Tom, this is going on. What would you do? I absolutely love that. And I'm finding that that's a bigger part of, not a bigger part, but an important part when these guys call me back, or gals. I have some females too that have been coaches, say, what would you do in this situation? So I love that position of playing a Paul with them.
I love it. So, you've mentioned the name of Jesus a few times, right? I remember growing up as a baseball player, all I cared about was baseball. I remember somebody interviewed somebody after they hit a home run and how'd you do it? Well, I got to give all the praise to my Savior Jesus. And I remember thinking like, what? He helped me. They're like, oh, he helped me do it. I'm like, what? He didn't help you do it. I don't understand.
Yeah.
And later in life, it started making more sense. But talk to me about this Jesus person, because there's probably people listening to this, either they know him or they don't know him, or they have these opinions about who this person is. Talk to me more about, this person, because you're using this person in a lot of your teaching, whether it's principles and all that kind of stuff. Talk to me about that.
Well, I think there's a misconception. People think church. I'm talking Jesus. And so what I had to do, I was challenged. I shouldn't say I have to do. I was challenged to find out who he was, not to find out what church was, because that's a system. And I'm for church and I go to church and all that kind of stuff. But I started reading, especially the book of John, and I had to come to grips with either he was who he said he is, or he's a liar, or he's a salesman or something, And he said he was the Son of God. So it came to a point in my life, had nothing to do with baseball or coaching. I realized that he was the Son of God and that he died for me. The stuff that we celebrate at Christmas and Easter was all true. And I asked him to forgive me, take over my life. Now, how does that play into being a fine athlete? You still have to run your sprints. You still have to take your tee time in baseball or in golf, I guess. You still have to throw BP and you have to take infield, outfield. But it's the inside of me. In other words, I know who I am now. And I know that he goes before me. And I know that he has given me opportunity. And I know that he is sustaining me in those moments when I feel like I can't do this. Hey, Tom, I put you there for a reason. He doesn't verbally say that to me, but the Word of God does. That once we become a child of His, once we ask for His forgiveness, He allows things to happen in our life. And so when I hear players say that, I was like you, but when I hear players say that now, I have a better understanding. This is not my whole life, but I'm sure thankful for the opportunity, because the other side of it is when I strike out, He must have allowed it. Yeah, but I had some responsibility too. And that's that fine line. So it's not about getting better baseball skills if you ask Jesus to come into your life, but you have bigger purpose and you know who you are. And we all struggle with that. We all struggle with worth. And so sometimes part of my course is talking about redefining a win. What does that look like? And so I have a high school coach, let's just say high school. Most of mine have been college, but and they're playing a game and they're 15-0. And I say, what would happen if you played the Dodgers? You'd be 0-15. So let's redefine a win. Let's look at the smaller parts of the team, because it's not only that you have that's awesome that you have a great record, but who are you playing? And I remember I did some part-time scouting for 3 different teams. That was always the thing. Yeah, they're not facing Sandy Koufax. They're facing Sandy Beach or something. It's not the guy's throwing 74. Don't get too excited if this guy's hitting the ball. And I think that having Christ in my life is a continual reminder that He loves me, that my performance does not mean that much to Him, although whatever I do, I need to do it heartily. And if I can give Him credit, I want to do that. Not to take it away from me that I had to put in the hard work, but to say I realize that because I have this understanding of who I am, I can go out there and play free. And guess what? Occasionally I hit a home run. Wow, that was awesome. Thank you, God. I was freed up because I know who I am in You. So this is an answer we could talk about for hours, right,
Sure,
Case?
sure. I love how you simplified it. And, I came to you as a, 26-year-old guy that, on paper, I accomplished my goals. The only thing I didn't really make was the big leagues, but I tried. And you gave me the Bible and told me to read the book of John, and I thought you were crazy. And gave it a couple of weeks, and I did. I just read the wrong book of John. I read 1 John, which didn't make a whole lot of sense. And that's the advice I'd give to any listeners, because I think that is a story, and it's either you believe it or you don't. But if you do believe it, it changes everything. So, whether you want to have a Bible or we can ship you one, I'll do that. I'll put notes in the show notes that can give you some resources that can help you. Because if you are not a Christian or a Jesus person, that book, that Bible, that book of John is a very simple story. And you referred that to me, 15 years ago, and it's changed my life. So thank you for sharing that, Tom, for sure.
And like I say, Casey, a lot of people just think church. I just got back from Europe, and I was working with a lot of German people, baseball guys, and they don't want a whole lot to do with church. Well, church is different depending where you live and who you're at and what church and all that kind of stuff. That's why it's just like in athletics or in business. Let's get down to the basic fundamentals first. Then we'll determine how to make the widgets after that, right? And who is Jesus? That's the challenge.
I love it. Well, let's talk about UPI. It's been around for 40-something years. So anything that's been around for 40-something years is doing some really cool things. And UPI is impacting tons and tons of professional baseball players, their families. Talking about UPI, what you did, how you built it, and then kind of what they're doing today.
Well, it started out, like I mentioned earlier, I had a company called Diamond Enterprises. And what UPI did was took that same concept of doing baseball clinics, but sharing Christ and working through a local church to help, us set up things. So the first one was in Milwaukee. It actually happened during Billy Graham. He had a big crusade there. And my friend wrote to me and said that they're doing a baseball clinic. And so I called them and they said, we don't have a clue how to do a baseball clinic, but the Brewers were brand new in Milwaukee and they were the big thing. So through a lot of different discussion, I end up in County Stadium on a napkin writing down how we might do this. The next day we do it, and it was awesome. And the Graham Association, challenged me to do this full time. And I'm like, I'm a baseball coach. I love doing this. This was great. I'm not a theologian. but I really got interested in more understanding of the scripture and such. A little bit later, the chaplain of all things for the Tampa Bay Buccaneers challenges me. When are you going to quit nickel and diming it, step out? You know this is something God's going to use. Well, I had a lot of people saying, you might get a real job. And I understand that, right? But when my wife said, what's the difference if college provides your income or God provides it direct? And I thought, well, so I went out and started this non-for-profit. But it started out to be baseball clinics in major league cities on a Saturday when the team is playing at night, and we do it Saturday mornings. Well, it's evolved quite a bit. All of the staff are former professional baseball players reaching back into the culture. I was a chaplain for the White Sox. I used to do baseball chapels. I was the itinerant runner in the Midwest, kind of. My friend Sam Bender of Chapel would have me do the White Sox, then the Cubs, then the Brewers, and the Indians, and the Pirates, then the Reds, then the Tigers, and I just keep doing that circle. Well, then when Vince Noss took over Baseball Chapel, he decided he wanted one chaplain for each team, and I did the White Sox for a number of years. Mickey Weston came on board, Tim Cash, Terry Evans, Don Gordon, the list of guys that it was amazing to me. These were professional major league players, many of them that wanted to serve Christ through baseball. And so in God's economy, he brought them on and little by little trained and grew. And like you say, I think the biggest thing here is that we're still around after 42 years. And when we talk baseball, you know, people ask me occasionally, what's the difference between AA, AAA, and the big leagues? And a lot of it, consistency. You know, the big leaguer needs to show up every day. And that's why you're in the minor leagues, to be able to see what you can do. And when they feel like, because almost all those guys have ability, that's not the issue. They may have 3 tools, 5 tools, 1 tool, but do they show up every day? Are they true pros? Are they giving their best? Are they giving their best? And so I think that is the thing as I look back on it, that, man, we just showed up every day. We just showed up every day, and it was nothing fancy. Now, people think, oh, you dealt with these major league players. Guess what? They're people. And they want to have truth spoken to them by people they trust. And so now Mickey Weston is running the organization and taking it way beyond where I was. And it's become a lot more discipleship, deeper, and but still they do outreach. So it's just been a great thing to look backwards and say, wow, I was able to hand the baton. Actually, I bought a literal baton and gave it to Mickey with a Bible verse in front of about 60 ball players and said, here you go, buddy. And that analogy helped me because I see a lot of leaders that want to hold on, you know, and I just sense that God said, pass it on, go home and see what happens. And it worked.
Well, let's end it here. The last pitch you threw, tell me about it. Not playing, but like recently.
Yeah, it was 4 days ago at Grace College from 40 feet 4 inches. They asked me to throw out a pitch. And quite honestly, Karen was like, oh, no, because I'd pulled a rib or something, dislocated a rib right before this, coming home from Italy. And I'm like, oh, no. So I went out there, and of all things, I threw a strike, Casey. It was unbelievable. And I told Karen later, my arm hasn't felt this good in 55 years. I'm 73 and a half. I'm like, I think I can pitch again from 40 feet. But yeah, there's a new baseball stadium they're going to be building, and they asked me to throw out the first pitch, so I did.
Yeah, and you know, they named the stadium after you. I mean, how cool is that? Because of all the things you've done for them over the decades. And Tom, truly, the impact that you've made on people, the impact you've made on me, it's just amazing. And this knowledge and wisdom that you shared here today, it's so good. I'm gonna figure out how I can summarize this stuff and put it in the show notes and all of that. So thanks again. And how would somebody go and get a hold of you, Tom, if they want to learn more about you and Shepherd Coach and all that kind of stuff?
Yeah, first of all, it's Tom Roy, UPI Field, because I fought against my name being on it. So they threw that in a committee meeting and threw my name with it. But it's what UPI's done also. Yeah. But They can get in touch with me. I'll give you my phone number if you want it. I don't care. I'm a lonely guy here, but email troy@upi.org. You can put that in the notes. My phone is 574-376-0162. Please text first because I'll hang up if I don't see your name on there so that I'll know that it's you. Yeah, and then I have a website, www.shepherdcoachnetwork.com. And I have different media and stuff on there. If I can help anybody, I'd love to be there for them.
Love it, Tom. Well, hey, thanks for being a guest on the Dugout CEO podcast, and really appreciate you. Dugout Nation, Tom Roy. Wow, what an amazing show today. Thank you so much for the wisdom that you shared with us today. Here are 3 big takeaways that I got. Number 1, how to reach your fullest potential. You need to have someone that will ask you, are you on course? Even coaches need coaches. It is so important that you have that person in your life that is going to push you and keep you accountable for the things that you should be doing. Number 2, how to lead people and get their buy-in. People need to know that you're a good example, both on and off the field. They should see that you love them and care about them. And it's not one or the other, it's a combination. But how do people actually know that you love them and care about them? Hold them to the highest of standards and ask for forgiveness when you cross the line. And number 3, people are more important than the program. The program is more important than winning. That was his concept of how he leads people. And it was super cool to hear what that means and how he takes action on that. So people first, program second, but the program is more important than winning. And if you do that, you will win more both on and off the field.